It's almost easy to feel good about the rise of artificial intelligence, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, these helpful tools seem to be everywhere now.
Totally. I even heard that university students are, like, routinely using AI to write their essays now and getting great grades.
Right. It feels like this incredibly convenient, almost magical technology has just sort of arrived.
But, as we often find, things aren't always quite as simple as they look on the surface.
No, exactly. And that's really the jumping off point for our deep dive today, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to take a closer look at what's actually powering this whole technological revolution.
You mean the data?
Specifically the massive amounts of data these AI systems learn from, yeah. And, what the less obvious consequences might be.
Absolutely. What's the real trade-off here for this seemingly helpful tech?
Well, to help us dig into this, we've got some really interesting material.
Okay.
We'll be looking at a YouTube transcript featuring Neil Oliver. He discusses a pretty concerning situation involving an AI whistleblower.
A whistleblower?
Yeah, and it ties into some significant questions that have popped up around copyright.
Right. Copyright keeps coming up with AI. So our goal today.
Our goal with this deep dive is to really try and unpack the complexities around the data that trains AI.
Get a handle on it.
Exactly. Get a handle on the growing copyright disputes and ultimately try to understand what this could all mean for creators, and maybe the future of information itself.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with what seems to be a core point of friction, copyright.
Right.
Our sources highlight a pretty significant report from Shira Perlmutt. She was the former head of the U.S. Copyright Office.
That's right. And what's fascinating here is the fundamental question her report asks.
Which is?
Should the owners of copyrighted material, books, articles, images, whatever, should they have to give permission? And should they get paid when their works are used to train AI?
That doesn't sound like a small detail.
No, it's huge. And the report outlines two very different opposing perspectives on this.
Okay, so what are those perspectives? Sounds like a real clash.
It is. So on one side, you've got the argument that if AI companies had to get licenses for all the copyrighted stuff they use,
Which is probably like almost everything on the internet.
pretty much, the argument is it would severely slow down progress, the innovation in this potentially groundbreaking technology.
How so?
Well, the sheer volume and the variety of data needed to train these advanced AIs, getting permissions for all of it might be practically impossible.
Right.
The worry is that innovation would just get throttled. Think of it like, I don't know, trying to get permission to read every single book in the Library of Congress before you're allowed to learn how to speak.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Just the logistics sound like a nightmare. Billions of pieces of data, tracking down owners.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's the other side of this debate,
Which
expresses a really deep worry that using copyrighted works without permission, without compensation, is going to fundamentally damage the entire creative world.
You mean artists, writers, musicians?
Yeah, all of them. Their life's work could be used without their consent to generate content that then directly competes with them in the marketplace.
Ah.
The report itself uses the word existential to describe what's at stake here.
Existential. Wow.
And I think that's a pretty accurate assessment, actually. When we say existential here, it means it could, fundamentally threaten the way artists and creators can even make a living.
Existential. That really hammers home the potential impact. Now, this report, it seems like it had some pretty significant consequences for Perlmutt herself.
It certainly looks that way. Our sources indicate she was removed from her position not long after this report was submitted.
Removed, like fired.
Well, the White House reportedly informed her that her job was ending. And what makes the timing particularly interesting, this happened not long after the Librarian of Congress was also dismissed. This whole situation really highlights a potential conflict, doesn't it, between the government wanting to foster innovation, push AI forward, and its responsibility to protect intellectual property rights. It kind of suggests that maybe in some cases the push for AI advancement might be getting prioritized over, established legal rules.
That definitely sounds like more than just a coincidence. And weren't there allegations of, political interference mixed up in this?
That's the implication, yeah. Joe Morell, he's a leading member of the House Administration Committee.
Okay.
He publicly suggested that President Trump took action pretty quickly after Perlmutt reportedly declined to basically just rubber stamp Elon Musk's efforts.
Rubber stamp what?
Musk's efforts to use copyrighted works for training his AI projects.
Wait, so the suggestion is Perelmuth was pushed out because she was doing her job, raising legitimate questions about copyright and AI, especially when it involved a major figure in the tech world, like Musk.
That's the essence of Morell's statement. He emphasizes that Perelmuth's office produced this report, it raised questions, expressed concerns about using copyrighted stuff for AI tech.
A field where Musk has huge investments.
Exactly. Morell sees this as executive overreach, potentially destabilizing a massive industry. It certainly makes you wonder about the independence of these important roles.
Absolutely. It starts to paint a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A really high-stakes environment where the drive for AI might be clashing with existing laws and, creators' rights.
It does.
And this leads us to another really concerning piece of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The story of Sir Balaji, the OpenAI whistleblower.
Yeah, Sir Balaji.
Who was he exactly, and what were his concerns?
So Sir Balaji was a former engineer at OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT.
Right.
And importantly, he was actually part of the team involved in training the AI systems that power these tools. He was there for 4 years.
Wow, okay, so he was on the inside.
Deep inside. And according to reports, Balaji later voiced pretty significant concerns that the technology he helped build was potentially violating copyright law on a massive scale.
So an insider perspective confirming potential infringement.
Exactly. It really underscores the potential for huge copyright issues inherent in training these large language models. And it raises questions about the ethical responsibilities of the AI developers themselves.
And it wasn't just a general feeling he had, right? He was directly involved with the data side.
That's the key. Reports indicate that Balaji later focused specifically on organizing the vast collections of online text, images, other media, the stuff used to train GPT-4.
The more advanced model.
Right. And it was apparently this very work that led him to question the legality and the ethics of the data being scraped and used, especially as these copyright infringement lawsuits started piling up against OpenAI and other AI companies.
Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting and honestly quite tragic. Our source mentions Balaji's death. What happened there?
Yeah, Balaji was found dead in his San Francisco apartment in November of last year.
Yeah.
Police investigations concluded that it appeared to be a suicide. They said no evidence of foul play was initially found.
And the medical examiner.
The city's chief medical examiner's office also confirmed the manner of death as suicide. Yeah, it's a very sobering part of this whole story.
That's incredibly sad. And yet the story doesn't quite end there, does it? There are still questions.
Yes, Balaji's parents have stated publicly that they are still seeking answers.
Yeah.
Which, is a very natural reaction for grieving parents.
Of course.
And their perspective certainly adds another layer of complexity to an already very sensitive situation.
Absolutely. Beyond the circumstances of his death, though, what exactly were Balaji's concerns? How vocal was he? Did he say anything publicly?
He did. Balaji himself expressed his unease quite clearly. He actually told the Associated Press back in the autumn of 2024 that it just didn't feel right to be training AI on people's data and then basically turning around and competing with them in the marketplace using that same data.
Okay, so a clear ethical concern.
And legal, too. He stated it quite plainly. He said, I don't think you should be able to do that. I don't think you are able to do that legally.
So he wasn't just having, moral qualms. He genuinely believed there was a legal problem, a copyright infringement issue.
Precisely. And his concerns were apparently significant enough that he was reportedly willing to testify in copyright infringement cases.
Testify against OpenAI.
Potentially, yes. In fact, lawyers for the New York Times in their lawsuit apparently considered him a source of unique and relevant documents.
Wow. Documents that could support their claims of willful copyright infringement against these AI companies.
That seems to be the implication.
So it sounds like he was becoming a really key figure in this emerging legal battle over AI and copyright.
Certainly seems that way.
And yet, our source mentions he felt like his view was kind of unpopular within the AI research community itself. Which is interesting, right? Someone working inside the field having such a strong dissenting view.
Yeah, that is interesting.
What might explain that disconnect? Why would other researchers maybe not see it the same way?
Well, that's a crucial point. Balaji himself apparently acknowledged that the sort of prevailing attitude in AI research was, well, they were just used to freely accessing data from the internet for training models. It was just how things were done.
Kind of the Wild West of data collection.
Sort of, yeah. But Balaji believed that this just had to change, that it was really only a matter of time before these copyright issues would have to be properly address.
Ah, yes, eye-cupping.
He saw copyright as an area where change was actually possible, even if it meant, going against the grain within his own field. Reports say he had become increasingly disillusioned with OpenAI generally.
This whole thing paints a rather troubling picture, doesn't it?
It really does.
You've got a former head of the Copyright Office, reportedly removed after questioning AI data use. You've got an insider AI engineer raising similar legal and ethical alarms, who then dies under circumstances his parents still question. How do these specific cases connect to the broader implications of AI's rapid rise?
Well, if we zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, it raises some really profound questions about the future of creativity, of intellectual property
Right.
in this new AI-driven world.
Right.
Neil Oliver's commentary, the one in the transcript we mentioned, it includes this really striking quote. He says that AI has basically hoovered up the entire sum of humanity's wisdom to date.
Hoovered up.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image. Makes you think about the sheer scale of data these things have consumed.
It does, and Oliver takes the analogy further. He talks about us potentially living inside the body of a whale.
Okay, what did that mean?
His point seems to be that while AI has had plenty to eat so far, all the existing human-created content it was trained on.
The stuff it hoovered up.
Exactly. It's still, in a way, in its infancy, and it's going to be perpetually hungry for everything yet to be created.
Ah, I see.
So this highlights a fundamental tension, right? The AI's constant need for new data versus the incentive for humans to keep creating stuff if their work is just going to be instantly absorbed and repurposed, maybe without any credit or compensation.
Yeah, why bother creating if it just feeds the machine that might replace you?
That's the core of it. And this connects, maybe surprisingly, with another idea referenced in our source, that World Economic Forum essay, the one about owning nothing and being happy.
Oh, yeah, I remember the stir that caused. How does that connect?
Well, while it might seem unrelated on the surface, it kind of touches upon this potential future where big corporations, maybe through AI, effectively control vast amounts of intellectual property.
Good.
If individual creators find they can no longer earn a living from their work because AI can instantly consume and replicate it, what does that mean for individual ownership, for economic independence, for artists, writers, musicians?
It definitely raises serious questions about the value we place on human creativity in that kind of landscape. And it's not just about the economics, is it? There are also these worries about the integrity of information itself.
Absolutely. This brings up a huge question about reliability and potential manipulation of information down the line.
So for you listening, this could mean that even sources that seem reliable in the future might be subtly shaped by AI, maybe with specific agendas baked in.
It's a definite concern. Think about it. In a future where maybe the vast majority of content we encounter online is AI generated, how do we ensure authenticity? How do we know what's accurate?
Yeah.
Our source even references classic texts, things like A Tale of Two Cities, the U.S. Constitution, the Bible.
Foundational stuff.
Exactly. If future generations primarily encounter these works through AI summaries or AI interpretations or AI-generated discussions, how can we be certain they haven't been subtly altered or manipulated to fit a certain narrative?
That is a chilling thought. We rely on those kinds of foundational texts as, like, anchors for our shared knowledge, our history.
We do.
If those become fluid, potentially biased,
Yeah.
the implications are just enormous.
It brings us back to a really fundamental question, inspired by René Descartes, as our source kind of concludes.
Okay.
In a world that might become dominated by AI and maybe the corporate interests controlling it, why bother creating at all? If the fruits of our intellectual labor, our creativity, are just instantly swallowed up and repurposed, what's the intrinsic motivation? To innovate, to write that novel, to compose that music, to create anything genuinely new?
Wow. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's clear we've touched on some deeply interconnected and frankly pretty heavy themes.
Definitely. We've looked at this tension, this real conflict between the seemingly unstoppable march of AI tech and the fundamental rights of creators to control their work, to be compensated for it.
And we've waded into the murky waters around the data used to train these incredibly powerful AI systems, highlighting the legal, the ethical questions that are still, well, largely unanswered.
Right. And ultimately, we've touched upon the potential long-term impacts on society from, the possible erosion of creative livelihoods.
Which affects real people.
Absolutely. all the way to the very integrity of the information we consume and rely on.
It really does keep coming back to that word you mentioned earlier, existential, doesn't it?
I think it does.
These aren't just niche concerns for, like, artists and tech bros. They have profound implications for all of us as individuals and for the futures of our entire creative landscape.
Which kind of leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
If artificial intelligence can learn and maybe even create by absorbing everything that has come before, all that human wisdom, it's hoovered up.
Yeah.
What unique and truly human contributions will define our future? And maybe just as importantly, how will those contributions be valued? How will they be protected in this rapidly changing world?
Something to think about. Your own role in this unfolding story.